Hello, 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 and welcome to the Sacramento Conversation on Board Diversity. My name is Janine Jenkins, and I am your co-chair with the incomparable Betsy Berkheimer-Creder. Hey, Betsy, how are you?
Hi, Janine. So glad to be here.
Yes, yes, it is. We have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon in store. And so just really happy that we get to be here and share with everyone who's come to hear about not only the legislation that helped us get to this point, but what they can do to also get on board. So we would like to get started, but first we can't get started without sharing and giving thanks to all of the wonderful, wonderful people that helped to get us here. So first, I'd like to start with our global sponsors, Buchanan Mellon, Wealth Management, Bank of America, RBC Wealth Management, McKinsey and Company, Ernst & Young, and of course, we wouldn't be here with you today if it weren't for Zoom and all the wonderful people who helped put this magnificent production together. We'd also like to give a shout out to our local sponsors, NABO, California, and Safe Credit Union. They have helped us helped us here locally to be able to bring this to you. And with that, we have some wonderful, wonderful people on our team and would like to give a extremely special shout out to Vikita Poindexter. Vikita is with Poindexter Consulting Group, but she's also the president of NABO California. How are you, Miss Vikita?
Oh, I am so blessed. Thank you so much. I am so excited about today and celebrating 2020 Women on Boards with you ladies.
Thank you so much. And I want to make sure that we mention Annie Lamb, who's the executive director of the League of California City Women's Caucus, and then Miss Erica Diaz, who is the VP of Marketing and Communications for Safe Credit Union. Thank all of you wonderful ladies for all your hard work. And then one of the reasons that we come to be able to glean knowledge and wisdom, our director coaches who will be hosting breakout sessions after our time together. So these incredible individuals have been so gracious to sort of lay themselves bare for you. You're going to go into breakout sessions after our time today together, and you're going to ask them all the questions that you can to be able to help you navigate what it means to get on a board. And so once you talk to them and you get some information from there, we can then talk about how you do some training. And Ms. Betsy will talk about that, about how you do training in order to make sure that you are prepared for what is to come for you in the future in terms of board seats.
Oh, thanks, Janine. And thank you, Vikita. Again, NABO California has been not only a great supporter of 2020 Women on Boards, but also was the driving force behind the passing of SB 826, which of course has had historic and incredible ramifications throughout the country, throughout the world. And we've made California famous because of SB 826, and glad to have done so. Right, Vikita?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, all great things start here in California.
That's right. So I'd like to just share with you a couple of notes about 2020 Women on Boards. I want to welcome many of our supporters from around the country who wanted to learn what's happening in California and wanted to get closer to what's going to be opening up in terms of the numbers of board seats that will be not available, but let's say findable, because of SB 826 and AB 979. And we'll get into those details shortly. But 2020 Women on Boards is celebrating its 10th anniversary. We're very proud of that. And I know that our co-founders, Stephanie Sonneven and Mally Giro, are in our audience today and cheering from the sidelines. But we want to thank them and salute them for all the work they did to start 2020 Women on Boards and to carry it through these 10 years. And the results have been, speak for themselves. Way back in 2010, not many of us can remember way back then, but that's when the Russell 3000 was only 10% of the board seats on the Russell 3000 index were held by women. And the Russell 3000 is 3,000 companies. We're not talking about just the Fortune 1000 or just the Fortune 500. We're talking about 3,000 companies. And that's what 2020 Women on Boards has done, is track the progress of every company in the Russell 3000. You're going to hear in a few minutes about the California statistics. In addition to our Russell 3000 tracking, you're going to hear from Annalisa Barrett, who talks about the California statistics that include the companies here in this state that are publicly held, but even smaller than in terms of annual revenues than the Russell 3000. So we cover the whole gamut here in California. But the whole mission started back in 2010 to reach 20% of the board seats on the Russell 3000 by the year 2020. And we achieved that goal last year in 2019. And so now the phenomenal statistic nationwide has been achieved at 22.6%. And you'll hear shortly, California is even higher than that. California leads the nation. And no surprise, because of the very, very meaningful laws that we're going to focus on. And unlike any other 2020 event in the country, we've had 28 events just in the last 3 weeks, and we will conclude with New York on Friday. But all 28 events are focused on educating women, thanks to volunteer director, coaches, and panelists in all these 28 events, and 4 of them are international. And by the way, there have been in this whole panoply of events over 3 weeks, there have been 400 director coaches helping women learn more about how to position themselves for corporate board seats, and 120 panelists throughout the country, and also the UK and Spain, which we held this morning, and Zurich and Mexico City, which was yesterday. So it's quite a phenomenal happening that 2020 Women on Boards has created, and is going to keep rolling into our next 10 years. So one other little factoid that we're darn proud of, we did a global broadcast with Melinda Gates and Melody Hobson and Valerie Jarrett. Many of you saw that on November 12th. We had 3,200 people tuned in for the whole 90 minutes on that show, which we're so proud of. And for the whole 28 events for 2020 Women on Boards, 6,700 people have registered to attend all our events. So I think we're on to something big, everybody. And I'm so glad about it and proud that you're here and also part of 2020 Women on Boards. So with that, we have a very special guest today. Very special. Unlike any other event we've ever done, we have the first partner, Jennifer Siebel-Newsome, with us to talk about her incredible California campaign herself, pulling together the California Partners Project that she's going to tell you about. So I'd like to turn this over to our special guest, Jennifer Newsome. Thanks for being here. Please take the microphone from me before I talk all afternoon.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Sacramento Conversation on Board Diversity, which is part of a global conversation led by Betsy Berkheimer-Creder and her organization, 2020 Women on Boards. To Betsy and her co-chair for today's event, Janine Jenkins, thank you for bringing together so many brilliant minds and for being thought leaders in this important movement and conversation. It's the tireless efforts of women like yourselves that are transforming gender equity in corporate America once and for all. And with all that's happening in our world right now, adding more women to corporate boards may seem like a niche subject, but the decisions made in corporate boardrooms expand beyond companies into their communities, society, and culture at large. Simply put, we need more women to be making these decisions. From improving environmental policies and how well our businesses react to crises, to impacting how companies support their employees, to enhancing stock market performance. And it is clear that when women lead, we all rise. That's why I'm laser focused on this issue, and it's why earlier this year I co-founded the California Partners Project, or CPP, to help increase representation of women on California boards. One of our projects at CPP is tracking the progress of California's public companies in meeting the requirements of SB 826, the law passed in 2018 by Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, who is here with us today. By ensuring that women claim more board seats, SB 826 gives California a competitive advantage for years to come. And by meaningfully tracking the law's progress, we can show to the rest of the world definitively that increasing women's leadership isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Public and investor pressure has already encouraged the most prominent, resource, and network companies to diversify their boards. But as our California Partners Project report demonstrated, SB 826 had an overwhelming influence on the shift in the board composition of small and micro-cap companies. When pressed by the law, these companies were able to find qualified women for their boards, and California's public companies went from having almost 30% all-male boards to less than 3% all-male boards in the span of just a few years. And now they will grow into mature companies with the benefit of diverse boards shaping their growth. That's a win for everyone and will keep California in the vanguard for years to come. It's really exciting to see the progress of companies in our state. Companies like DocuSign, they went from 0 women to 3 women on its board, including a female board chair. Or the cosmetics company e.l.f. Beauty, now it has 6 women on its 9-member board. And then Unity Software, a company that IPO'd in September, is starting strong with 3 women on its 9-member board. And this is just the beginning. There are enormous opportunities over the next 2 years to add even fresher perspectives to California's corporate boards. Because as our report shows, between now and January of 2022, there will be over 665 more board seats for diverse women to claim. And that is why it's especially exciting to be here with all of you today, both company leaders and future board members. You know better than anyone that there are qualified women ready to serve all across this state and country, and it is past time they are given their fair due. So together, let's make filling these 665 seats with phenomenal women leaders our collective 2021 resolution. Because the good news is we're not alone in wanting to reach that goal. Last month, CPP held a series of focus groups with top business leaders, investors, executive placement firms, and gender equity advocates, including today's co-host, Betsy Berkheimer-Creder. And we have learned, among other things, that business leaders are hungry for an updated blueprint of board best practices, and that they genuinely want to learn from the companies that have created the most representative and effective boards. Seeing the energy and richness of the discussions also confirmed for us that there's a vast network of influential people in our state that are eager to tap into the opportunity afforded by Senator Jackson's law. And speaking of opportunity, we're already seeing that SB 826 is creating new opportunities for women beyond securing board seats. One recent study in the Harvard Business Review shows that corporate board service may actually serve as a new pathway or catalyst for women to secure more CEO jobs, invigorating efforts to promote these women into top positions as well. As I said before, when women lead, we all rise. And the opportunities before us are limitless when we finally give women equitable seats at the tables of power. At the California Partners Project, we're so proud to be a part of this moment. And I know that the governor stands with us in doing everything we all can to encourage the addition of more women especially women of color, to California's boards. So today, we're lucky that we get to hear from the people who created this opportunity for leadership in California. And it's my hope that we be inspired to hold companies accountable for rising to the challenge. We're excited to partner with all of you in ensuring California's continued leadership on the world stage. So without further ado, I'm pleased to pass it to Annalisa Barrett of KPMG's Board Leadership Center, also a member of the CPP Advisory Council, to share some of the findings of our recent report on SB 826. And have a great session. Thanks.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Jennifer. It is just an honor to serve on your advisory council, and we're so grateful for your leadership in this area, especially to raise the conversation and elevate the awareness regarding the importance of women in the boardroom and board diversity. I'm thrilled to share the results of the study that your team put together, looking at the progress of implementation of SB 826. The report is called Claim Your Seat, and it can be found on the California Partners Project website. I'll jump right into the statistics and show you that 650 companies were studied for this analysis of the implementation, current progress report of the implementation of SB 826. And I just want to take a moment to point out that that's over 10% of the publicly traded companies in the US that are headquartered here in California and subject to these laws. And that in itself makes such an impact on our capital markets more broadly, with that many companies headquartered here. And as Betsy mentioned, so many of the companies that are headquartered here in California are microcap companies, or companies that are so small that they're not included in the major indices, but still have such an impact on our communities, employ so many people, and create products and services that impact our society. And having women's leadership in those companies is so important, as has been mentioned. As the first partner mentioned, we had such an increase in the presence of women in the boardroom as a result of SB 826. Over the first year of implementation, we saw great growth, and now we have almost 1,300 women serving in corporate boardrooms here in California. One thing that's important to note as well is that the vast majority, 90% of those women, are serving on one company board. So we have a very large candidate pool of directors who are serving on the boards here in California. There are, about 10%, a little bit under 150 women who are serving on more than one California company board. But in general, we have the opportunity for so many women to serve in the boardrooms in California. On the next slide, we can see the growth that has taken place, again, since January 2018, before the law was implemented. During that year that it was under deliberation and that first law of implementation, we saw 66, almost 67% growth in the number of women on boards here in California. And the great news is there's opportunity for that continued growth to happen, because in order for all companies to comply with the requirements under SB 826, we'll need a continued growth of 52% in order for all companies to comply. And I'll just take a minute to note the requirements under the law are that by the end of December 2021, so by the end of next year, all companies headquartered here in California will have to have at least one woman on their board. That was the requirement at the end of last year. But companies with boards that have 5 directors will have to have 2 women on their boards. And boards with companies with boards with 6 or more directors will have to have 3 women on their boards. So in the end, the vast majority of companies headquartered here in California will have 3 women on their boards in order to comply with the law. The next slide shows us, again, highlights the opportunities that there are for so many of you in the audience today to be considered for these board seats. Nearly 3/4 of the companies headquartered here in California will be adding women to their boards in order to comply with the law. And so the good news is that some of those companies are adding one, and some of those companies will be adding 2 women to their boards in order to be in compliance. The next slide, again, just highlights the impact that this law has had. As we see in 2019, the first year of the law's implementation, we see that that huge jump in the number of women who were added to corporate boards here in California. And we're on pace for that to continue this year in 2020, but also next year, as was noted, we'll see, I think, a large spike again in order for all companies to comply. One other thing that I would note is that the other impact of the law is that the conversation regarding the benefits of diversity in the boardroom has entered into the discussions among companies that hadn't been thinking about it in the past. And as has been mentioned, California is setting the stage for companies around, or for states around the country to consider this type of legislation or type of encouragement at the state level as well. So other states are following suit with either similar laws or increased focus and expectations regarding having more diversity in the boardroom. So I am just thrilled to now bring back onto the screen your co-chairs, Janine and Betsy, so that we can transition from here and start the panel discussion. So welcome back, Betsy and Janine. And I know you have some thoughts on the statistics and the findings from the study as well.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And Annalisa, if you would, it's our understanding that at least 200 women got board seats last year on those statistics. And we expect in the neighborhood of 600 this coming year before
exactly. Yeah, over 300 actually once it came to the companies beyond the Russell 3000, the smaller including the smaller companies, over 300 last year. And then, yeah, next year there's at least 650 plus seats that will need to be filled by women in order for all the companies to comply. So a lot of opportunities for women who are ready to serve on corporate boards to seek those opportunities.
And we always get the question, how do I find those board seats that are open? Because there is no list, there's no way to apply. Your networking is your key, which is what we're going to be talking about all day. And the best way for you to start, though, is to go to the 2020 Women on Boards, 2020wob.com website. And our 2020 research, meaning for the year 2020, as of June 30th, is all updated on our homepage. You can filter for California and filter for those companies that don't have any women on their boards, which is only a handful now. It's like 7 or 8 companies. A couple of them left the state, not because they didn't want to put a woman on the board, although we thought that would happen, but they left the state for other reasons, and they actually had a woman on the board. But do filter for those California companies that only have 1 woman, or filter for those that only have 2 women, because all are required to have a minimum of 3 by the end of next year. So if this is your starting point, then you can look at the websites of those companies that you might feel some kinship toward or might be in your industry, and seek, maybe looking at the website, maybe you know someone who's on that one of the boards of those companies. And it does take homework. This is on all of us women to be doing our own homework and our own positioning of ourselves to get those board seats. And I would just close my comments with to thank Annalisa for all the work she's done, because Annalisa, when all of us went up to Sacramento and lobbied, well, we didn't lobby, when we met with legislators, when we testified on behalf of SB 826, Annalisa was right there with us all the way through, and we all stood behind Senator Hannibeth Jackson to get the bill passed. And by golly, I want you to know it was a 7-year battle, everybody. Let's call it a struggle. It was 7 years that it took us to get. It was not some overnight miracle that happened in wacky California, as other states refer to us sometimes, right? So not an overnight miracle. A lot of work, and I applaud Nauvoo, California, and Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson and Annalisa. Thank you so much, and thanks to Jennifer Siebel Newsom for being a champion for us all. Now that we're going to really skyrocket from here. By the way, just a little note. And I don't expect any other states to have a law like ours, because others have watered down their laws. They may have started to have something that would be copied on our format, requiring 3 women on the boards, but no other state passed that. Washington State has a law that targets 25%. But also says if you can't do it or you don't want to do it, you just simply have to report your statistics, right, your diversity efforts. We're the only state in the union, and probably will always be the only one, that has a law as definitive and specific as ours is. So thank you, Annalisa.
Thank you for your leadership, Betsy. This all could not have happened without your leadership and Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson. So thank you both.
Well, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Janine. Thank you, Annalisa. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Janine to introduce our panel and start moderating this great panel we have.
Yes, and so and this is the group that's going to help you figure out what you need to do in order to claim your seat. So with no further ado, let me introduce the folks that are going to be here to just share with us for the next about 45 minutes or so, and help to give tips about just the legislation and then potentially their journey in various respects. So I'd first like to introduce Andrea Clack-Rogers Veneto. Andrea is the youngest Black public board director in the country, serving on the board of Umpqua Bank, where she's a member of the Finance and Capital Committee and Compensation Committee. We also have Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, who is the author of Senate Bill 826, the first in the nation legislation. And this is what brings us here today. Would also like to introduce California Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, and he's focused on helping us to just modernize what we're doing and keep pushing forward. We also have Mary Morris. She is an investment officer with California State Teachers Retirement, and she is within the Sustainable Investment and Stewardship Strategies Unit for CalSTRS. They are, by the way, the largest educator-only public pension fund in the world, and so she'll be able to talk about some of those investments. And then we have California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara, and he is here to talk to us about the work that he has done championing or continuing to champion diversity in the insurance industry. So welcome everyone. How are you?
Great, happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Good, good, good. So I think what we will do is I will start with our first question. And so I think we'll start with you, Andrea. What experience do boards really value today? How does experience leading companies through crisis make corporate directors more valuable?
Thank you. One of the things that I recently heard that I think is relevant is someone said, if you've seen one board, you've seen one board. And this really means that, especially in this environment, depending on the company, boards value different things. At the core, being a good governor, because so much of the work is about governance, and financial capability, because your role is to represent the stakeholders. However, when you think about that financial capability, while it is important to understand the various financial metrics, that also means growth, revenue, cost avoidance. And so when you think about that financial capability, there are new experiences that boards are valuing even more today around maybe marketing or supply chain or cost avoidance, because all of that ties into the marketing picture. What I think is especially important around boards and the value, especially as many people think about their own journey to the boardroom, is can you be a good partner to the CEO? As we've likely heard, being a CEO is a really lonely position in the sense that many people that you want to talk to about work, it's hard to because there's a delegation of responsibility and reporting. And so how can, especially in crises, your experience support CEOs and the entire management team as they're making the tough decisions they're making right now, providing perspectives on critical topics to that business? What we just went through, we've seen so much change in workforce development and talent development. We've seen changes in furlough and layoffs and diversity, or even on the other side of it, with all of us working from home, we're seeing more expertise in cybersecurity. And so how can those experiences really help where boards are today and what will be their critical priorities over the next few years?
Very cool. Would any of the other panelists like to chime in on that?
Well, I'll throw in my 2 cents worth. I think given the fact that in what will be a post-pandemic world, the whole issue of how we are going to change work as we know it. We've seen it already happening, people working at home. We're seeing, particularly for women, the challenges associated with trying to juggle all those balls all in the air at the same time. Some of them come crashing down. And the need to get a lot of these women who've left the workforce back into the workforce, because this is a huge talent pool that we are losing. I think it's going to be incumbent upon our corporations to really take the lead and do some innovative kinds of thinking as to what the world of work is going to look like in a post-pandemic world.
Yeah.
And
for
Janine,
sure.
if I can jump in here as well, first and foremost, a big thank you and kudos to Senator Jackson for her vision on this legislation and her courage to line up the votes in both houses of the legislature and insist on a signature for this landmark bill that has led to us gathered here today. So kudos to you, Senator Jackson. But to the question about the value added of women on boards, which, for those of us here is a no-brainer. I haven't sat on corporate boards personally, but I have sat on a number of nonprofit boards, even a university board for my alma mater, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And from what I've observed across different types of boards, is sometimes there's formal official carve out for certain board seats, or sometimes it's just a good idea to have a seat or two for the legal minds on the board. Because as you mentioned a few minutes ago, navigating the legal responsibility is critical and fundamental. Same thing for financial experience, whether it's an investment type background or accounting type background, somebody who's good with the spreadsheets and the numbers. But I think the balance of the board and the board as a whole is made stronger with just richer and diverse experiences. At the end of the day, you're trying to lead an organization, in this case, corporations, not just through the short-term economic challenges and opportunities, but really thinking about the longer term. Where is this entity going? And what networks, relationships, expertise, or life experience does each individual board member sort of bring to that table, either for the purposes of informing strategic planning or fleshing out a plan into an actual work plan to keep that entity moving forward, both in the short term, midterm, as well as the long term. So I think as women are interested in serving in boards, and we'll go through some nuts and bolts of how to position yourself, how to pursue opportunities, I think one of the first steps is to really think what makes your experience and journey unique, and that defines the value added to a future board that you're going to sit on.
And Janine, may I jump in as well? Thank you for having me and having CalSTRS, because of course, as investors, we were reciprocal as far as receiving the value in this, because for the bottom line for us, it is really about the returns, right? And it's the returns for our California teachers. We cover, our beneficiaries are from pre-kindergarten to junior college. So, the empirical evidence is there, the research is there. And of course, this legislation has helped us. We had many different California initiatives with many of my colleagues in different pension funds throughout California join in and engage our companies. And so the legislation just gave us the wind behind our sails. And as Annalisa said, you know, it just was wonderful. It was unbelievable. And it did help us grow, you know, the need and also the diversity overall, and sort of help to start reflecting really what companies should look like as far as their customers, their stakeholders, and overall. So I think the empirical evidence, and thank you again to all the panelists and all the hard work that was put into this legislation. And I know maybe we'll be talking about AB 979 too, because that's even more beneficial to investors, to companies as well, because the research does show, you know, that the evidence on long-term returns for investors, for their stakeholders, and for the company itself.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And so, you know, and talking about just the return and being prepared for that future landscape, do you see more companies truly embracing diversity today? And how are boards effectively increasing diversity through proactive succession planning? Because those two kind of go together, right? That forward, that future landscape, and that succession planning about who's coming next. Like, what are you seeing?
Well, Janine, if I could jump in, first and foremost, I want to thank again the incredible Senator Hannah Jackson. And I had an opportunity to serve as the chairman of the Appropriations Committee when this bill was being heard, and to be able to once again be able to help in this endeavor was critical, and particularly as a gay man, to be able to have that discussion about also including transgender women. Was critical to the discussion as we continue to fight for equality for every woman. And so, look, as your California Insurance Commissioner, I oversee and regulate the largest insurance market in the country, fourth in the world. And now as a regulator with this legislation and the other legislation, it gives you a tool unlike any other to be able to ask those questions. So, you know, what does the board look like? Who do you have on the board? How many women do you have? And be able to have that policy behind you to be able to allow you to even push further as we continue to work on diversifying our boards in the insurance industry, which now has also led us to actually look at supplier diversity and the need for being able to invest in these, not only investing these insurance dollars in communities of color and underrepresented communities, but also looking at who you're doing business with, making sure that those are women-owned businesses, businesses owned by veterans, people of color. And again, we've seen time and time again, if you have women on your board, if you have a diverse board, all these other initiatives kind of fall into place because it's driven from the board itself. And so hopefully, you know, we live in a world one day where we don't have to legislate all these things because it's going to be already part of the financial target and success of these companies.
I'll jump in here. I absolutely agree. In the sense that there's so many issues that in many ways diversity has been separated as not a business issue, and it is very much a business issue. And I think this year, especially some of the conversations we've had after Black Lives Matter has opened up the conversation for a little bit more authenticity, a little bit more sharing of perspectives that frankly, some leaders did not have, not because they didn't want it, but unfortunately, they had just never been exposed to some of the challenges that some of their employees were facing. So if we think about opportunities around your board and your executive management, do they reflect your customers or your stakeholders? That's more revenue if you bring that perspective into your next product or service. If you have executive representation where people of different backgrounds can say, hey, I might be successful at this company because I know that there is a leader and they are valuing those leaders. Guess what? That's more talent retention and retention of institutional knowledge because it costs a lot of money to train employees. And so I think that companies are embracing diversity. We still have a long way to go across various subsegments, but I have been pleased to find that there has been more authenticity in these discussions. If you think about Some people said, oh, we could never work from home. What have we shown? That people have known that they can work from home for a while. People would say, I didn't understand Black Lives Matter. And that's okay if you didn't understand it, but now we're having more conversations about it. Or even people who needed more flexible work arrangements for taking care of a child or an aging parent, whatever that situation, we are now giving them more opportunities to be included because of the environment that we're in.
Mm-hmm. We certainly are. We certainly are. And so, you know, you talked about some of those tangible benefits that come from having this diversity on a board. How do you persuade or tell other CEOs, frankly, you know, male or otherwise, about how women directors make a difference and why it's important for business and taking it beyond what research says about profitability and productivity of the company?
You know, I think from my perspective as an investor, it really is about culture. And as boards embrace that culture, it really does make a difference. And I think if you speak with other women directors, they will speak about the need for more than one woman, right, of course, on the board. The best case is 3 women on the board so that they have that voice. But it is about building that culture. And I think from the perspective that I've seen over the long haul of being in corporate governance for a long period of time, you know, it was slow at first. And of course, this legislation has helped quite a bit. But I think boards, just as Andrea had mentioned, they are trying to be more authentic and understanding. And really, our push to boards, of course, is to evaluate every year. They need to evaluate their skill sets, not just about diversity overall, but diversity overall and fullest about skill sets, experience, diversity, LGBTQ, right, gender, you know, whatever it might be. But that's going to bring the biggest breadth of changes into your company, and also to give you those different perspectives. I think from, you know, investors, we continuously engage companies on this, and we work with board members, and they're looking, you know, asking, you know, of course, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, they'd say there was no databases or availability, but that's not the case now. So it's there, you know, we're here today, and I think boards realize that, you know, not only for the business purpose that Andrea mentioned, but it is important for the whole board overall to evaluate on a yearly basis, look at succession planning, and then think through what your long-term strategy is and how you can identify those right skills. COVID has revealed everything, you know, to us about the need for human capital management, cybersecurity, so many different skill sets.
Yeah.
I'd like,
If I could just you know, follow up on Mary's point and suggest that there's certainly the value added that we talked about earlier, and the sort of proactive or opportunities that diverse minds bring to a board. Let me put some value and point out some good checks and balances too. All right, I'm sure we've all are aware of stories over the years of maybe a well-intentioned initiative, whether it's a strategic initiative for an organization to pursue a diverse consumer base, or maybe just a communications or marketing idea that, while it was well-intentioned, might not exactly have been culturally competent or respectful or appropriate. And you need those diverse minds and hearts in the boardroom and throughout an organization to say, stop. This, you know, you may be well-intentioned, but this is not the way to do it. And you can actually prevent disasters and crises by having a more diverse leadership.
and I think it's also important to keep in mind that when you have this greater diversity, particularly I'm looking here at gender, we have an extraordinary talent pool that exists. We are now seeing more women graduating from college than men, and having that experience. And we know both, not just, you know, sort of parenthetically or you know, sort of instinctively, what the studies that have been done are very, very clear and unequivocal about value added, that bottom line, which is so important to our society, to our system, but not just the bottom line. We know that when you can attract women who are extraordinarily talented, but they also have families, how do we get upper management people, mid-management people into our corporate structure when they are also raising families? How do we accommodate them? Because when we are able to accommodate them, when we do accommodate them, businesses do better. So it's not just sort of the top of the top. And it was mentioned earlier that when you have people on boards, when you have women on boards, you're going to find more women CEOs. Well, we all network, and a lot of the extraordinary talent that I've come to discover is because of the networking I've been able to do. And once you open up your own life world, your world, if you will, to other diverse groups, you discover all the talent that is out there. And once that talent is brought in, as you say, it creates greater opportunity for everyone. It creates greater cultural competence and understanding. You attract more people to your business, and thus you will be more productive and profitable if you open your doors. And part of the reason, frankly, that we felt the need to do this legislation is that I sometimes, somewhat, I guess, disrespectfully, referred to the boardroom, to the C-suite, as the last bastion, the last man cave, the last bastion of male control. And we just needed to crack that, because what we discover is once you do that and you bring in people who represent the community at large and your customer base at large, women are 70% of the consuming. We're the ones that go out and buy those products that these companies are making, and that adds to the bottom line. When you understand that women might look at a product or a process differently, and thus you're able to bring in more of that 52% of the population, or you're culturally more competent, so you understand what is more appealing to a particular group of people that you yourself in your own life experience may not have had. That simply opens up the gates of profitability and makes companies better, which then attracts better people who are going to be more loyal, greater longevity. One of the things that I was hoping that we could put into this measure is the notion that when you have women making these major decisions, they're going to ask the question, what are we going to do about the childcare needs of our employees? Let's provide some of those options. The world as it has evolved, more of our men don't necessarily ask that question because there's someone to take care of the kids. They don't have to worry about it. The women kind of have that responsibility that falls upon them, or caring for aging parents. These are the things that we bring to the table. These are the questions that I think need to be asked by these corporations. And when you bring people into your boardroom who have all of these life experiences to share, there's an old expression, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu, is I think critical when you understand that those boardrooms need that diversity of experience, not just people who can crunch numbers, because we know that, Alex mentioned that, back, or if it was my good buddy Ricardo, my good buddy Alex, I got to serve with both of them, which was just a great thrill. Now they moved on to bigger and better things. But when we talked about the need at the time to bring a different perspective to the table, we were also dealing with the Me Too movement. Which of course continues, but at the time we had situations like with Harvey Weinstein. I would submit that if that board had had a woman on it, knowing what they all knew about his behavior and having to put millions of dollars into a fund that was anticipated to pay for his behavior, a woman sitting on that board would have said, "Are you kidding me?" And I think that is an example, an illustration of how getting greater differences in diversity helps make companies run better, period.
Janine, I want to give you a quick real-time example of conversations that I've had alone this week with several CEOs of, multi-billion-dollar insurance companies. And, again, there is no doubt that the bill has completely helped. But in this case, in California, we only have one domestic insurance company, right? So we have to work with all our other fellow insurance commissioners around the country. But we do know that California insurance companies here collect $310 billion in premiums annually. So we're the largest in the country, right? And what this means is, no doubt that the social movements that we have seen over the last couple months with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor has really cracked open this opportunity to really have honest conversations about diversity and how to, as insurance companies, industry that is still very male, as I want to say straight male, and very white, and very conservative. And so what we did at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, now that there's more of us of color and LGBTQ, was what is a national strategy that we as regulators are gonna have these insurance companies adhere to, so that we're not just being picked off state by state. And so now there is a policy where we're allowing and creating the space for CEOs to come to us and say, how am I going to diversify not only my board with women and people of color, but my industry and and how are we going to provide opportunities for women and people of color within the insurance industry? Because a lack of that, what has resulted is, unfortunately, is that in the financial world, in the insurance world, if you know how to manage and manipulate those financial products, that's how people build wealth in this country, right? And so not enough women and people of color have, taken advantage of that. And so we as a national industry are pushing. So I've had conversations with the CEOs who are now, we're saying, we have the responsibility as regulators to tell you what we want to see, but we want you to use your creativity to tell us what you're going to do by a specific time frame. So, we are having those real-time conversations, and there's no doubt that the law that was passed in California, the social movements that we're seeing, and with even the movements within people's companies, their employees are demanding that this company take action and take their part, and a leadership moment that we have now to create positive change, in which we're going to see much more women in these corporate boards, people of color taking part of these financial tools that help you build generational wealth.
But how do we get there, right? There's no way to apply for board positions. Corporate board positions are not posted on www.applyhere.com. They're not announced publicly. And so what do? The succession planning for board seats, it's a confidential and closely held process that's managed by the current board. Outside of traditional networking opportunities, what types of non-traditional networking habits do you suggest? Like, how do you suggest that that the folks that are needed to create this diversity and create these gains, what do you suggest they do to get there? Because these positions are very tightly held, closely held to the vest.
I'll jump in here. And you bring up such a great point. It is still in many ways a very nuanced process. It's very still networking driven. And one of the big pieces of advice that I always hear, we say network and visibility. But what does that really mean? And I don't know many people that can say, oh, I just love to network. Let me go out there and do that. So how do I do it in a way that is relevant and makes sense? And prior to this call, we talked a little bit about strategic networking. So if someone's looking for a tactical, how do I expand my network? Where do I start going? You can lean into your expertise or industry association. So if you know that there's an industry event where you have significant expertise, that is a natural channel for you to go to and to meet other people that are in that industry, that function, or that specific area. And then also while you're there, communicating what your intent is. Usually when you're networking, there's usually a sit back where people are saying, okay, I don't know what this person wants. I don't know what I want. How do you get there? And so being honest, whether you're looking for a role or you're looking for a board opportunity. And then also knowing that the process takes time, because while you're networking, just because you want to be on this 10-person board where all 10 seats are currently filled, they might not have an opening for another year. And so how do you just start those relationships, getting to know, and then being very clear about what it is? Someone mentioned this earlier. your unique value proposition. So whether you are a marketing expert, cybersecurity, or you've led many acquisitions, if that company has also grown through strategic acquisition, you should probably focus there on that specific experience that you think is relevant, and you'll have to thread the needle. So I would love to say, here, go to this one place and you will see all the opportunities listed. There are a number of websites, including 2020 Women on Boards, where you can start to look at some of the companies that may have opportunities and communicate with them there. But it is very much about being focused and thoughtful in your communication, and then clearly communicating your intent, and then just knowing that it is a relationship-driven business for now. I hope somebody does create a website and says, here are all the positions, and it's a pure meritocracy in that regard.
And if I could just add one thing, Janine, this just points to the tremendous value of events like these, right? Because there is no natural entity, organization, or PO box for the list of very qualified women to serve on boards to be. It's these types of venues that bring people together and, without a doubt, gets the attention of those very same corporations that are needing and looking to fill upcoming board spots, that this becomes that opportunity for networking and visibility that Adria mentioned.
And I think just that one thing to add to what Alex is saying too is when we're talking to corporate boards, we're also asking them, they don't necessarily, they can increase their board. If they're really looking for skill sets, they can change their charter. There are opportunities for them to look at that. There is no one place, of course, to identify and put yourself out there to get on a board, but we push boards to look at nonprofits, academia, regulatory skill sets. We also, there's lots of different databases. The 2020, the 30% Coalition has some databases. Equar has 36 databases that are diverse databases. So if you belong to SEN, the executive leadership, California, Latino corporate directors. I don't want to name them all, of course, but there's lots of opportunities to network through those groups that will help you build those skill sets and then get that advocacy out there for you, for that person who would like to join a board.
And if I could just add, this doesn't necessarily answer that specific question, how do I get on boards? But to put pressure on boards, shareholders, once shareholders become more aware that they are losing money by the lack of diversity on their boards, and they start articulating that, putting pressure on the board membership to add women. I do this all the time for the 2 shares I own of this, that, and the other, and they want you to vote. I send back a little note and say there are no women to vote for, or how many people of color are on your board. And the more we can see shareholders engaging in this, there will be even a greater increase. I don't think 3 is the ceiling, 3 is the floor. And so when we have boards of 10 or 15, I want to see at least half that board comprised of women or people of color, representing the diversity of our state and our country, because we know that's going to maximize our profitability and our return on our investment, and just make for a better society. And I also wanted to point out what Ricardo mentioned, the accumulation of wealth. We really need to be able to give that opportunity to everybody, because as we see that income divide getting worse and worse, the ramifications of that on our society are going to be even more severe than they are today. So whatever we can do to try to stimulate participation in wealth development and participation of people of color and women in particular is my passion here. We've got to get 52% of the population looking like the LA County Board of Supervisors. It's now 5 women who are going to be that Board of Supervisors. What's wrong with that? There have been 5 men for hundreds of years. But once we open those floodgates, the energy, the synergy of this benefits everybody. And shareholders, I think, are a key element. I know, Mary, you hold a lot of money there in your little portfolio. And when you speak, they listen. And I think when shareholders speak, they will listen as well.
I think you made a, oh, sorry, Andrea.
I would just support paying it forward. So the effort that Senator Jackson and many of the other policymakers on this call have put forth. As more legislation comes forward, let's communicate it, let's share it, because that creates more opportunities for all of us.
And the only other thing I was going to add was what Senator Hannah Beth Jackson said, was that we're all shareholders in some aspects in our own portfolios, even though they might be minimal securities. And I think it is important. You know, every time we consider our proxies very important, a very important tool in how we vote and how we engage with our companies. So even as myself, I realized over the last 8 years, I'm like, oh, I need to vote my own shares. I shouldn't just be letting management vote my shares, even though I've voted, you know, for the last 20 years on behalf of CalSTRS and CalPERS. So it's a very important part.
Making a note right now to find my shares, to send it in, and I'm going to write my note as well. So just as we sort of wrap up our conversation, you know, this is all wonderful, wonderful information when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. So how can a woman gain allies in today's COVID environment? Is it different now than maybe previous to sort of around in these little tiny boxes? Is there a difference? How can a woman's own CEO be her ally?
So I will try and answer the first part. I think allies are found in so many different places. And what truly makes, I think, someone stand out, whether it's a board candidacy or anything else, is having a perspective and a viewpoint. There's a temptation when wanting to get on a board to be all things to everyone and to say that you've done everything. But really, if you think about, there are a limited number of seats on a board. What is the value that they need? And it's usually a level of expertise. So even in this COVID environment, where you are involved, and if you don't mind, Janine, I'll share a quick story. I was on one of these virtual industry events a few weeks ago. It was in my industry, which is in consumer, which is the area I just love learning and being a part of. And so I'm in this event. We're all giving our introductions. There was a leader there who gave their introduction, and I said, wow, that company seems really interesting. And so I, clicked over to Zoom to go cyber stalk a little bit and do some research. And when I came back to Zoom, that same leader had sent me a chat and said, hey, I just went to look up your background. It sounds really interesting. I'm looking for a board director. And so the story here is, while I recognize this is not the case for everyone, and so I don't say this is the standard, I think the point here is around being expanding your networking, but going in a way where it makes sense, sharing your opinion, sharing your profile, and then some of those things will naturally occur. And where they don't occur, find ways to continue to share your expertise and contribute. And I think no matter where you are and what you're doing, people do value when you have a meaningful contribution.
Yeah, and I would add, just like the pandemic has impacted every aspect of our daily lives, that same networking and raising your visibility is different, because we're not gathering for luncheons and dinners and receptions anymore, but we are gathering via Zoom, or maybe with family via FaceTime or other digital platforms. And a lot of organizations and businesses have shifted in that direction, not by choice, but we've done that. So continue to search out those opportunities, and I talk about bringing our experiences and our journeys to the table as the value added. My wife and I can compare notes all the time on what we're thinking about, whether it's the reopening, cautiously, what are we worried about, or the closures again when the numbers go up on COVID. We're not going out to eat, so what does that mean in terms of restaurants, or what we're buying at the grocery store, or what it's like to homeschool. Right? And so it's one thing to look at it through the lens of a parent or a spouse, but if we stop and think about it, let's flip the script a little bit. And what does that mean from an economic standpoint, from a business standpoint, from an industry standpoint? And that's what we're talking about, bringing that layer of perspective that may or may not be sufficiently represented on boards.
And if I could just throw in a pitch for when we get to that post-pandemic world, this is a great opportunity for us to reevaluate the old policies, the old mindset, the old cultures, and change them, because the 21st century is very different than the 20th, and we still use so many of the 20th century models in the way we do business, in the way we think of leadership, in the way we sort of kind of create our own boards and our own leadership within a company. I think this is, out of lemons, you make lemonade. It's sort of something I always try to do. I think once we get through this, the opportunities to really reevaluate and redirect how we do business, how companies operate, what that leadership looks like, embracing that diversity, we can really, I think, have turned things around. And since we're all stuck now and talking by Zoom and not being able to shake hands or give a hug when we see people that we know and like, we certainly have that opportunity and should take advantage of it. And I think really corporate America can take the lead, and women tend to have that kind of creative daring, if you will, but that's rooted in strong practicality. I think the future would be better off if we did have that diversity reflected on our boards, and particularly going forward, how we are going to live the next century post-COVID.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I think what you said is tremendous. As we go post-COVID, let's not go back to normal necessarily. Let's really sort of use this experience to adjust our lens and really review, what do we want post-COVID to really look like? I think as we're here in our little boxes, we have an opportunity to think that through. And I think, what all of you have said about just reaching out and ensuring that we have that diversity of experience, we have that diversity of people from all walks of life, because the communities that these organizations serve, it is not monolithic, right? There are lots of people in these communities, and I think it's certainly important for the boards of our organizations to reflect that. And I think you all have shared that beautifully. Thank you so much for your time and for your expertise and for sharing with us. We, as a group here in Sacramento, as a group attending the 2020 Women on Boards event, are better off for it. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to bring Betsy back on. Betsy, wasn't that amazing?
What a great panel. I wish we could all hear the standing ovation in the room. Thank you all. And every one of you, the panelists, and you too, Janine, did a great job, and are influencers in this whole issue. And it comes at a time when just yesterday, NASDAQ recognized the importance of the issue. You probably saw the Wall Street Journal story and a wire story that NASDAQ has proposed to the SEC that all of their member companies would have at least one woman on their board and one person of an underrepresented population. So thank you, board members, for being so much a part of this momentum that we're continuing to build. And I wanted to add too a couple of things related to your question, Janine, about how to find and get on boards. I mentioned earlier, going to our website, 2020wb.com, to, on the home page, scroll down and filter California and the companies that have 0, 1, or 2 women on their boards, but also think of your own networks, people you know. Many of those people, of the women, the 200 women that were placed last year, were recommended by their attorney, their own attorney, or their own CPA, or their own banker, believe it or not. So all of you can easily give a call or a Zoom call to your attorney, your banker, your CPA, and say, hey, there's quite a movement about getting women on boards. You might even call it a scramble this coming year. And if you, my banker, CPA, or attorney, get calls, would you recommend me because I have the experience in this category? And you're going to discuss that in the breakout sessions right now. And also your nonprofit boards. I must say, this is a shameless commercial, but my book, 2020, it's not 2020 Women on Boards, you can't see it, winningtheboardgame.com. 85% of the women in the book were recommended for their first corporate board by somebody who knew them on their nonprofit boards because they've seen them in action, and industry trade association. So all of you have networks you just haven't thought about, and you have people you can call on a Zoom and offer them a cup of coffee just to ask their advice for 15 or 20 minutes. That's all. And don't ask them to be a mentor. Don't ask them to be your sponsor. Just say you'd like their advice. And we know, we love the men in the room. Men love to give advice. So it's a good opener. So with that, I'd also like to say that search firms are not the answer. There were many questions in the chat. Search firms are not the answer because boards are built on relationships of trust with people they already know. And so, and even if they don't know them, they know somebody who knows that woman, and like the banker, the attorney, or the CPA. And therefore, all of you women in this audience trying to figure it out, when you find out those companies that are in need of you, but they don't know it yet, you start to think about how you can work your magic to get to a board member or get to a CEO, because it is their recommendation first that they give to the search firms. We search firms, and I own one, Berkhammer Clayton, for 26 years. We search firms are given the list by the NomGov committee to say, these are the people we know, please vet them. All search firms are given that. And then the search firms say, well, will you also consider women and people of color whom we could recommend? And their answer is always yes, but they're most likely to choose somebody they already know or someone who's known to a friend of theirs. And that's okay. We can't require them to take people they don't feel will be bringing their business acumen to their board. They're all trying to build their board, increase value, and increase the vision and the strategy of that company. At any rate, don't even worry about search firms. Search firms are not the answer. Simply get to your friends and work your magic that way. Also, we have our upcoming workshops. So I'm going to switch very quickly, and go through our national slides just to let you know about the national statistics related to California quickly. And thanks, Janine, don't leave. All right, the percentage of women on boards I mentioned earlier nationwide is 22.6, and that is the percentage of seats held by women in the Russell 3000. And look at California. We made it this year to 24.7, which is almost 25% of all the 511 companies that are in the Russell 3000 that are in California. And on the next slide, you'll see the W companies. Now, traditionally, we've always recognized the W companies that have reached 20%, because that was our vision and our goal, to reach 20% in the year 2020. And by golly, with all this effort, look, go back a slide, go back, right. 2018, 2019, 2020, you'll see of the 511 companies, how many are 20% already. Here in California, 349 companies are at 20. But that is 68% of them, and a huge increase. But it still means we have a lot of room for more women on these boards. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Because we're saying that 20% is no longer good enough. No longer good enough. And why? Because, drum roll, we want to have gender balance boards. We want to have, at least 50% or thereabouts for women on the boards in California and nationwide. And you'll see the two differences in the columns here. The bright red is nationwide, and there are only 163 companies that are sorry about that. Yeah, that only 163 out of almost 3,000 that have gender balance board. That's 5%, and it's the same in California. So we have a long way to go from 5% to 50%. So what's next? Our vision. Our new campaign advocates for gender balanced boards. And then beyond that, what is our vision? That all public companies will be gender balanced, with women holding half of the corporate board seats. And then lastly, that brings us to our new brand name, announced on November 12th and going into effect on January 1st, 50-50 women on boards. We're no longer going to be 20-20 women on boards, 50-50 women on boards. Standing applause, standing ovation, please, and great applause for this great goal that we have. And we're not tying ourselves to a year. We're just, whenever a company makes it to 50-50, we're certainly going to applaud that. We're going to give awards for those companies that are gender balanced. And that's what we're shooting for, everybody. And thank you, Mally and Stephanie, once again for starting us on this great adventure. We will continue to educate women, collaborate with companies, and advocate in public awareness campaign for more women on boards. And then lastly, we are continuing our highly popular Get On Board workshops. We'll resume in February. And then we're announcing a brand new program that was Stephanie Sonneben's brilliant idea, Path to the Boardroom for women in their mid-career. And the Get On Board workshops concentrate on women who are just about to step onto a corporate board or need that final positioning, if you will. And the mid-career women need greater visibility, need to understand how to build their networks in their industry. And that's what Path to the Boardroom is going to focus on. So we'll be able to, we're not from cradle to grave yet, but we're at least taking over the middle now, as well as the later careers. So, and lastly, again, we're so delighted to be becoming 50-50 women on boards. And for the next month, you can still visit us at 2020womenonboards.com, but then our website will change to 5050wb.com. Continues to continue to be with us on social as well. And with that, I'm going to come back to Janine and say thank you so much, Janine, and all of our fantastic panelists. We're going to move into our breakout sessions. And there's one important thing that I want to mention on the breakout session. Please look at your calendar invitation, because your breakout session is the second line below the link. I mean, it's your link. It's below the link that got you into the into our panel session. So check your calendar invitation, and if for any reason you can't find it, you'll see where to, in our upcoming slides, our closing slides, where to find it. Once again, we have a help desk, so don't panic. You'll be able to get in. Janine, I want to thank you for doing a wonderful job as our moderator and our co-chair. It's been just a pleasure working with you.
Thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful experience. I'm so glad that we were able to be connected.
Me too, me too. So we'll now break and just take about 3 minutes as you move into your breakout sessions. And this is the end of the show in a sense. So the director coaches will close out. You won't be coming back to the panel area. You're moving into your separate link for that session. So thanks to our director coaches and our panelists. We're going off the air now, but tune into our next breakouts. Thanks so much. All the best. Thank you, Sacramento.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day.